Hello and welcome to the video. Today, we're going to look at how you and your alliance can win more wars. For those of you that don't know me, I am Arashi, and for quite some time I was a leader over at Rebel Wizards. We reached an all-time high ranking of number 17 on the leaderboards, and this was in part due to the rigorous war planning that took place. I personally oversaw many of the war plans during my time there, and it was because of this strategy, teamwork and communication that we managed to rack up quite an impressive set of victories against some formidable opponents, even when the odds were stacked against us. More recently, I have been travelling around to lots of different alliances, and I'm currently over at the Exiles family. These guys also know a thing or two when it comes to wars, and I've been granted access nearly all areas, to see how they do things. And in today's video, I plan on putting together all of my experience over at Wizards, together with everything that I've learnt whilst travelling, into one neat little package so that you can help your alliance win more wars. So if that sounds good to you, then hit that like button, consider subscribing, because I am going all out for this one. Right, let's do this. So it goes without saying that every war is a team effort, and within your team, within your alliance, everyone has a role to play when it comes to the war. First up is defenders. These guys will typically set 3 defensive coalitions, and it's going to be their job to scout enemy bases, i.e. enemy defenders. Link in the description to a video where I explain how to do this in detail. And they will typically use their second attack to take out one of the lower bases on the opponent's team. Now, the next 3 roles are essentially attacking roles. And this is like the number one thing where I see wars are lost. Every attack is precious. So let's break down each one. And these are going to be relative to your alliance's rankings. So tier 1 attackers, those are like your heavy hitters. They're going to be the ones that will take out the enemy defenders, the ones with the big defensive museums and the 3 defensive coalitions. Next up is tier 2 attackers, and these are going to be the guys that will clear any bases that don't have 3 defensive coalitions or a defensive museum. Essentially, they're going to clear the opponent's offensive bases. Knowing what bases you can clear is going to be essential for your alliance winning more wars. And it's okay to admit that you can't clear big defensive bases, or the tougher bases. As I've said many times already, wars are a team effort and everyone has to play their part in order to win. It's important to understand that every tier of attacker is just as important as the other. It doesn't matter if your tier 1 attackers have wiped the floor with the enemy defenders if the tier 2 attackers have overstepped their mark and there are still offensive bases that haven't been cleared. So if there's someone in your alliance that might need to hear this, then send them this video. And last up is tier 3 attackers, and this will be typically those that will clear the very bottom bases on the opponent's team. Now, what tier attacker you are will depend on many things, such as your age, your museum, your council, and your ability. And the good news is that everyone has the potential to improve, and I have plenty of videos shown here and in the description below that you may want to use to help support people within your alliance or even use for yourself. This brings me nicely onto what is next, and that is knowing your team. Even if you're not a leader or a co-leader, knowing the strengths, weaknesses and abilities of the people within your team is only going to help support and enable you to work better together. So if you are a confident or strong attacker, be there to support those in your team that might not be as strong as you. Now, the in-game chat on DomiNations is famously bad, so having somewhere like a Discord or a group chat is the best way of being able to do this. At the very least, just make sure you're communicating with each other, sharing ideas, and being there to support one another. Next up is knowing your enemy. And in the words of Sun Tzu,
if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the results of 100 battles.
So, how can we get to know our enemies in DomiNations? Well, planning day. Planning day is 24 hours where you get to suss out and weigh up what your opponent has on offer. If you are a defender, have a look through the opponent's offensive museums and see what they are running. This will allow you to determine which are the best defensive coalitions for you to set. Good teams will do this routinely, and the folks over at Exiles even use a fancy little Sophia bot that they use to announce this to their team. If you are an attacker, have a look through the defensive museums, see what they've got, and it might be that you need to change your museum to a different attack strategy that you may have. Good leaders will do a lot of this for you, but it's important that everyone on the team understands that these are the sorts of things that need to be considered. Planning day is also where you may decide whether or not you need to fill your defensive strongholds with stronger troops than you normally would. It may also be where you decide that you don't want to fill your strongholds. This is because you may decide to contact the enemy team and come to some sort of empty stronghold agreement. This is always favourable for you and your team if you have less defenders than them. If you weren't aware, there is a Discord called DomiNations Prime. This is where the majority of teams can be contacted to make these agreements. Some teams prefer to use Line or Telegram. Making these agreements and deciding whether or not to fill your strongholds and what to fill them with can make or break a war. Good teams have these decisions nailed. Again, the guys over at Exiles have that cheeky little Sophia who they use to communicate these things with their team. If you do decide to fill your strongholds, then a combination of high-level generals and strong troops are quite good. And if you're going all out, then Eisenhowers and Caro tanks are where it's at. When it comes to filling town centres, then just use MRLs because they just destroy everything. There is another way in which you can get to know your enemy, and that is through a handy little website called DomiStats that you can go to, and you can look at your opponent's war history. By doing this, you can see whether or not they're beating alliances similar in strength to you or not, and then make a call whether or not you want to go all out to beat them. All of the things I've talked about so far have taken place on planning day, before the war has even started. On the day of the war, you'll want to double check that the museums of your opponents haven't changed. But one of the most important things on war day will be looking at your opponent's base layouts. If your defenders are scouting any bases, of course, this will also be useful information to help you beat those bases. One thing we did when I was at Wizards was we actually kept all of this intel and saved it in case we matched those same teams again. And it's quite common to meet the same team over and over again. So do your homework because it can really make a difference when it comes to actually beating those teams. So, you know your role, you know your team, you've sussed out the enemy, now we need a plan. When it comes to plans, the level of detail your alliance goes into will be completely up to you. But I'm going to share some examples with you now, ranging from very simple right through to looking at the fine details. And in the words of Jack Reacher,
details matter.
So at the very least, have some basic expectations. Defenders should make their scouts as early as possible. This gives attackers time to plan their attacks carefully, and attackers should make their first hit within the first 12 hours of the war, and their first target should be one that they are 99% sure that they can clear for 5 stars. These first 12 hours of the war will give you a good idea of where your attackers stand with clearing the remaining bases. Now we're going to take it up a notch, and we're going to refer back to those different roles that I spoke about at the beginning. Same as before, we want the defenders to make their scouts as early as possible. We also want the defenders to make their second hit as early as possible against one of the lower bases that they can clear. This will then allow the tier 2 and tier 3 attackers to see what is left for them to clear. It also allows the tier 2 attackers to cover any bases that the tier 3 and the defenders couldn't clear themselves. Lastly, the tier 1 attackers will make their hits against the toughest bases and also then clear up anything else that is left over. Essentially, the attacks are made from the bottom up, allowing for the stronger attackers to clear and make up for anything that is not cleared by the lower attackers. Next up, we've got sort of like a higher level plan, and this is something that I see used quite commonly in alliances that are within sort of the top 100. This is commonly done by leaders or co-leaders. However, if you feel like you have a good understanding of your alliance, then ask if you can have a go at doing one like this. Essentially, you'll go through the enemies with a fine-tooth comb, and targets will be pre-planned in advance, players' roles will be clearly defined, and it will adjust as the war goes on. Let me show you an example. So here's a recent war plan from over at Legend Exiles. It was unfortunately against another Exiles alliance, however, the plan still remains the same. There's no mercy when it comes to war. So we can see at the top we've got the stronghold expectations and like a general overview of what's happening, and then each of the tiers have been broken down and specific bases and targets have been assigned to them. This means there is very little room for error, as everyone knows what they need to do and who they need to hit, and as I said before, it allows those higher tiers to help support those lower tiers if their bases aren't cleared. Now we take it up another notch, and we're going to have a look at a type of plan that I did quite commonly when I was at Rebel Wizards. And again, these are the sorts of plans that I've seen many top alliances use because they really dig down into those fine details. So it's very similar to what we just saw. However, at the bottom we have a very snazzy little spreadsheet, and I do love a spreadsheet. What we've got on the left hand side here is the Rebel Wizards crew, and the different tiers that we have there are the blue being tier 1, yellow being tier 2, and orange being tier 3. We have some specific targets assigned and some specific scouts assigned. This then correlates to the column on the right hand side where we've got the War Machine BR crew. The opponents highlighted in blue are the tier 1 targets that the tier 1 attackers will hit. And we've even then got a breakdown of the defensive museum stats so that the attackers know exactly what they are up against. And we've also got a little overview of what attack styles their strikers are using. This type of plan worked really well for us over at Rebels. As I said at the beginning of the video, we managed to climb to an all-time high rank of number 17, and that was partly down to the planning that took place and the amazing teamwork and communication that was over at Rebel Wizards. We certainly had a blast, and we loved a jolly good war. Next up, we have the God tier plan, and this is where things are taken to like the nth degree. It essentially encompasses everything that I've discussed so far in all the levels of plans, and then takes it one step further as well. So let's have a little look and see what currently a rank 3 team in the entire game does when they plan a war. Just look at that spreadsheet. Oh. So it takes into consideration the enemy's defensive museum stats, but not only this, it then calculates a sort of difficulty rating for those targets that the attackers can take into consideration when they are hitting it. We've then also got an average 5-star time here based on the difficulty levels of each of the bases. Not only is it important to ensure that you get 5 stars, but also that it is as quickly as possible so that you can win a time war should it come to that. So those are the different levels of plans that I've seen and used and been a part of in my time playing Dominations. And as I said, whatever level of plan your alliance uses or decides to use is completely up to you and them. Having a great plan still doesn't mean you're going to win the war. It will still come down to, of course, making those all-important attacks. But having as much information and a clear strategy to enable you to be as successful as possible is, in my books, definitely recommended. Just to finish up here then, an alliance is only as strong as the people that are in it and the team that it has built. Communicating with each other is essential to winning wars. Supporting other alliance members, teaching them how to get better, helping them learn, and being open-minded yourself to learn and improve is also important to being a better alliance. Make use of the resources out there, such as the Dominations Prime Discord, the Wizards Discord, and of course the Exiles Discord. Check out DomiStats because there's a lot of interesting information on there. And of course I've put links in the description for all of these below. And one last shameless promotion, if you haven't seen any of the other videos on my channel, do go check them out, there is lots on there. Please consider subscribing. Thank you for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next one. Peace out.